Hello. This is a meeting of the Select Board for Tuesday, July 27th, 2021. The Select Board will be entering into executive session for the purposes of litigation, real property strategy, and collective bargaining. Actually, that is not true. Sorry, I borrowed that from a past one. This one is strictly litigation. If doing so in open session would have a detrimental effect on our negotiating positions, and the chair so declares. The board will reconvene in open session around 5:30 p.m. All those in favor of entering into executive session: Raul,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Miriam,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Hello, this is a meeting of the Select Board for Tuesday, July 27th, 2021. The Select Board has just exited executive session, and we will begin our regular session for tonight. Announcements and updates. I have, I think, 3, and I will make them very short according to our 90-second policy. One is Jenna Fisher recently left the Brookline Patch to take a job, I believe, teaching in St. Louis. So their gain is our loss. I enjoyed working with her and learning about other issues that were going on in Brookline through a lot of the articles that she wrote for not only the Patch, but the Tab as well. The other announcement that I would like to remind all of us is the closing of the warrant. That will be Thursday, September 2nd, 2021 at noon. And the Select Board will meet again next week, and then we won't meet again until August 31st. Just a reminder. Any other announcements? Miriam?
I would just like to say that I got my I Love Big shirt for my donation to Big. So please support our local network, vital to our political process and engagement with the public. So just giving my go Big.
Excellent. Any other announcements before we proceed to, okay, John?
Just a hearty welcome to Brookline's newest school committee member, Val Frias, who was chosen last night by a vote of the school committee and the select board meeting in joint convention. And what was so wonderful about the meeting was not just that there was a consensus around Val for to replace Dimitri Anselm, who unfortunately had to leave his seat. But there was also, I think, a consensus that we had an extraordinarily talented and inspiring sort of group of people who applied for that position. It was a pleasure to interview them, and it was a pleasure to know that there are people who are both excited about the school system, excited about Brookline, and willing to serve in a voluntary capacity on the school committee of the quality that we were introduced to last night. So good for one and all.
Excellent. Any other announcements or updates before we move into public comment? Seeing none, I will turn it over to Vice Chair Raul.
Thank you, Heather. And thank you everyone for joining us for this public comment session. This is an opportunity for us to hear your perspective on the issues in Brookline that matter to you. We do, of course, have a few rules I'd like to share. Each person speaking tonight is limited to 3 minutes. You don't need to use the entire time, but you may if you like. Please refrain from personal attacks and from addressing personnel issues during your comments. Members of the public sometimes raise questions during public comment. We may be able to provide a quick answer to a question, but are more likely to work with staff to get a more thorough answer and respond over email. We'll let you know when you have 30 seconds remaining, and when your time is up, please do conclude your remarks at that time. If you have more to say, you're welcome to send an email to board members expressing your thoughts in greater detail. Who's playing the role of Devin tonight?
I am vice chair, and this is Kate, and we have one person that signed up for public comment. It is Neil Wyszynski, and I'm promoting him now.
Great. Anyone else that wants to speak during this time, please contact Kate McGilvery either in the Q&A or chat feature. Take it away, Neil.
Howdy. I apologize for the washout. I signed up to speak about land use planning, which of course is not a especially sexy topic, but it's really at the core of municipal government and what municipal government does. And we've seen a town meeting, the last few town meetings, really protracted discussions and perhaps disagreements about land use planning in the form of warrant articles. And I and some others, and many others, think that we need to engage in a more structured, systematic process. We're seeing other symptoms of some of the weaknesses in our land use planning. We've seen a bunch of one-off zoning proposals. We're seeing what's shaping up to be kind of a nasty fight over on Hart Street in my neighborhood, which at the core of it is because, in my opinion, the zoning for that area is completely wrong. It's out of the urban renewal era, and it encourages tearing down the whole neighborhood. And the ARPA money, I think, presents an opportunity to create, to have some additional resources aimed at a more structured, community-based process. And we're going to be, a bunch of us are going to be proposing a re-envisioning of Brookline process with trying to engage in discussions to have townwide goals. And there's a lot of planning going on right now. There's the HPP, there's Lower Boylston, but there's nothing tying it together. And the Lower Boylston really has been a good process, and perhaps as a model for some of the neighborhood plans, and perhaps as a model for some of the community engagement. But I would also offer up as a model of what Somerville did in their summer vision. And in the end, the end result should be, I think, a revised zoning bylaw. Our zoning is outdated. It's hard to understand. It's not producing the desired results. And frankly, it's a mess. And I would argue it's an embarrassment. And we can do better. The ARPA money gives us an opportunity to bring in some outside resources. And there's really
You have 30 seconds.
Thank you. There's a lot has happened with COVID. A lot has changed with COVID. And I would argue that we need to plan in the new post-COVID environment. So I would encourage you to be bold and use a piece of the ARPA money for this purpose. Thank you.
Thank you. Kate, do we have anyone else signed up or otherwise indicating that they'd like to give public comment?
Nobody has indicated at this time.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Heather, back to you.
Great. I believe we have a short update from Dr. Jett. So let's squeeze that in here before we move to our miscellaneous.
Hey, good evening, everyone.
Welcome.
So I'll just give a brief update and feel free to ask me any questions. It's a lot that has been going on in the news. You see the Delta variant is spreading. You see CDC is starting to go backwards on the mask lifting that they did. So I would just say a couple of points around that. Right now, Brookline is averaging close to 25 cases a week. Most of the new variant is out of the UK. We do have a few from Brazil, but not that many. Most of our COVID cases is in the younger population, in the 20s. Our vaccination rates that you do see is not accurate. I have reached out to the state. We have also published articles in the paper of the actual vaccination rates, which we think is higher than what the state has, so I'm having them to confirm that. In May of this year, CDC stopped doing surveillance on the efficacy of the vaccine. They published an article May 24th in the USA Today on the back cover saying, and I think I kept the article, saying that they were no longer going to do surveillance unless it was severe cases of somebody contracted COVID and landing in a hospital. So therefore, we would never know the true efficacy of the vaccine. Now, unbeknownst to you, I warned the military because we brought everybody back in person in May and June, and I participated from a distance because I knew that people were still passing the vaccine, passing COVID along, even though they were vaccinated. Even amongst our own staff, we've had a few scares where The person felt some serious symptoms, called EMS, and luckily they didn't have to be admitted. So one of the things that I would just caution, and this is not in relation to schools, but as I travel, if I'm around in crowds, even if I'm outside and I'm near people, I still wear a mask. If I have some social distancing and the temperature is high enough and it's hot, humidity is high, I feel more comfortable with not having a mask on. But if I'm indoors, I have a mask on, even though I'm fully vaccinated, because I still don't want the symptoms and I still don't know the people that surround me. If I contract it, I could pass on to somebody else. And so, I will stop there. I still have some predictions that we need to watch in the fall. And I wait to see what happens with that. So I'll open it up to any questions.
Any questions for Dr. Jett? Have we seen Delta variant in Massachusetts?
Yes, we have.
Okay.
I don't know how much of it we have seen, but I do know it's the dominant variant in the United States right now.
John first, then Miriam, then Bernard.
Yes, Dr. Jett, thank you for those comments and for bringing us up to date on that. Can you just go a little bit further and share your thinking with us as to how you will determine in the days and weeks ahead if we have crossed some threshold that requires rolling back the policies that are now in place in Brookline?
That's an excellent question. So as you remember last year, and during the summer months, and this year is a little bit off, we averaged about 3 to 4 cases a week. So it was very low numbers. After October 31st, when we hit 2 weeks after that, we reached probably about 40 cases a week. After Thanksgiving, we reached 90. After Christmas, New Year's, we reached 134 cases per week. So one of the measures that we need to look at is once we start to hit that 50 to 70 cases per week, we need to take a look at where those cases are and if we need to start to roll back things. So I wouldn't do unless something happens from the governor's office, I wouldn't do like mass rollback, but maybe very targeted situations.
Miriam, and then Bernard.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Jett. I think that's a great, for those of you who don't know, I am actually also a medical doctor with a background in disaster response and pandemic response. So I think there's a great opportunity to just remind people that the goal of the vaccine is to prevent hospitalizations and death, that people will still get sick, and that's expected. So I think it's important that we take precautions. I think it's important that we watch what's happening, but I also think it's important that we manage the expectations of what this vaccine in particular is supposed to do. And I will tell you the latest data is that of those who've contracted the virus after being vaccinated, fewer than 0.0007% have died from COVID-19, while unvaccinated people make up to 99% of the COVID-19 deaths in the US, and that is with the Delta variant. So please be safe, please take precautions, but also, please understand the vaccine is doing exactly what it is we hoped it would do, which is reduce hospitalizations and reduce death.
So on that note, please get vaccinated still.
Yes, and that. please. And I will say it's super important you get the second shot, because Delta variant coverage increases significantly with the second shot if you're in Moderna or Pfizer. Obviously, J&J is still a single shot.
Bernard.
Yeah, even a slight case of COVID has difficult consequences. So I canceled a trip to a low vaccination state recently. But anyway, my question is, I'm getting a lot of, not a lot, I mean, a significant number of emails and questions on the street from people about the vaccination rates here in Brookline. You mentioned that the rates that are published are not accurate. And I assume that's because, like me, I got my vaccination in Cambridge and probably didn't show up on the Brookline statistics. Are we getting out that information, because it seems to be concern of a lot of people?
Yeah, so we have put that information out. Also, somebody from Panel 4, Dave, actually printed an article, or wrote an article for the Boston Globe and Tab. And then my internal epidemiologist looked at the data and confirmed. So now I'm going back to the state so that they can correct their figures, because we have some zip code misalignment in terms of the vaccination rates. So I'm hoping they correct that. But the state did tell me that that's not what they do. So,
Yeah.
they just publish by zip code. They don't look at census tract.
Okay. So publishing by zip code means that they look at where you actually get your vaccination as opposed to where you live?
Well, there's some overlap, not necessarily where you get your vaccinations at.
Okay.
Miriam wants to add to this line
Yeah,
of questioning.
So the actual real problem here, Bernard, is Chestnut Hill. So the zip codes in Chestnut Hill have been, people who've been getting vaccinated in those zip codes have been getting attributed to Newton and not to Brookline. And so that's skewed the data, and that plays out actually when you look at Newton and when you look at Brookline. I'll find you the article, I'll put it in the chat. Dave Gayshock wrote an excellent piece that really summarizes it as well.
Excellent.
Okay.
It's within the zip codes 02445, 02446, and 67. And, we had the data because, we looked at it internally, but we didn't publish an article. But Dave did publish an article, and we did have some conversations about it.
Okay. So is it not the case that me getting vaccinated in Cambridge did not show up in Brookline as a Brookline vaccination?
Well, you put your address down, so.
Right.
Okay.
They go based on where you live.
Okay.
Raul, did I see a hand? Yes.
Yeah, I just want to, pick up on something you were talking about, Dr. Jett, around the masking and in a second about the vaccinations, but folks will continue. It's important to understand that the young people are below the age of 12 are not yet eligible for vaccinations, and folks who have young people in their families might want to be extra precautious. And so, I don't know that we have this as so much as an issue in our community, but sort of the shunning of people that are still wearing masks when, hey, everything's fine, everything's back open. We have to recognize that there are people in the community that still need to look out for and care for family members who may not even have access to the vaccine just yet. It's not universally available yet. As it relates to the, we're hearing from, news in other communities about the potential for requiring vaccinations of municipal employees, or in the case of not being vaccinated, regular testing being required. Is that anything that you're looking at right now, and maybe sort of rolling out any recommendations on soon?
No, I take the guidance from you.
Well, collaboratively, right? So it's important. I think hearing your thoughts on that, if not now, then in the future.
I think that's something that I would have to talk with Mr. Kleckner on, and the HR department, and then of course look for recommendations from you on that.
Okay, great, thank you,
John.
Yeah, I just want to add a little bit more to this discussion of the inaccuracy of what was reported as to Brookline's vaccination rates. Yes, it is a problem of the 02467 vaccinations, Brookline not getting credit for those that were from Brookline, but it goes even beyond that, as I understand it, in that the number that is used for Brookline's total population does include the Chestnut Hill zip code. So you have a lower number than we actually should be getting credit for when it comes to how many people have been vaccinated. And then you have a higher number than is actually the case for the town's population. And this became apparent to me very early on when I noticed that the state totals for what it is counting as Brookline come to around 64,000 people.
That's
And
correct.
that is nobody's, version of what the current population is. Maybe when the census numbers finally come out, it will be, but at this point, that's just an error. So the denominator is too high. The number of vaccinations that we should be getting credit for is too low. The number's not accurate. It's incredible how many times that has been corrected. Dave Gashik wrote about it, twice in two different newspapers. And whenever it would show up as a misunderstanding on Facebook, Dave would correct it, or somebody like me would correct it. It just keeps coming back to haunt us that somehow Brookline has this extraordinarily low vaccination rate. It's not true. It's a distortion of data. I urge people to watch, if they can, expert panel number 4 on Friday. They do a fantastic job, excuse me, of presenting the data and in a graphic form and in a very analytical form that helps you to know really where we are in this situation. And that's Dave Gashik and his team. So I just want to make sure people know that we're getting extraordinary service from some volunteers when it comes to tracking this stuff. It's just frustrating that their accurate information is sometimes crowded out by the inaccurate information.
But I would just say one last note. So the state contacted me about our low vaccination rates, and they used the same data that was published in the Boston Globe. I disputed the data several times. So I've been having this dialogue for several months. And then I further iterated that it was the state that decided to add vaccination sites at Gillette Stadium and at Reggie Lewis Center. And not one time did Brookline get a site. And to me, access to vaccines, just like access to care. So if we lag behind, it was merely the fact of the rollout of the vaccination. But also, I asked them to correct their own data that they accused me of having low vaccination rates. So it's an ongoing dialogue.
Well, thank you very much for this update and for your work on this.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too. Okay, so the next item we will be discussing is a jam-packed miscellaneous calendar item. I just want the select board members to take a look at everything before I kind of start talking and reading off every single one. I'm not even sure if we went through the entire alphabet on this one.
19.
Yeah, very close to exhausting all the letters. If there is anything that any member wants to pull out, we can have that conversation right now. Otherwise, in about 30 seconds, I'm going to start reading the list of what's on the miscellaneous, and then I will propose us to vote. Bernard.
Yeah, I don't think we need to pull it out for discussion, but I would just urge people to look at the Washington Street corridor contract. It's a very important contract for the town, and it's actually a very exciting project. I urge people to really look into that. I mean, the contract is kind of dry and not really that interesting, but keep your eye on this project as it develops over time.
Yes, transportation is one of my near and dear issues, and what we're hoping to accomplish on Washington Street, I think will have a lot of impact on the community, bus riders, bicyclists, and motor vehicles, as well as pedestrians. Any items that concern board members? Otherwise, I will start to read what's in there. Okay, I'm going to start. You know what? Let's do the meeting minutes from July 6th first, and then I'll read the rest of the miscellaneous. So I move approval of the meeting minutes from July 6th. Bernard.
Yes.
Raul.
Aye.
John.
Aye.
Miriam.
Aye.
Okay, now I will start to read
Chair votes.
Oh, and the chair votes aye. Thank you, Bernard.
I hear this all the time.
Yeah. Okay, so question of approving the authorization to hire for a paralegal secretary in the legal department. Then approving the authorization to hire request for a preservation planner in the planning and community development department. Approving the authorization to hire request for 2 positions in the library department, a library 1 reference information and a library 3 supervisor of collection development. Approving the authorization to hire request for a jobs coordinator in the Council on Aging department. Next, a series of contracts. Approving contract for the Washington Complete Street Corridor with World Tech Engineering for professional survey, design, and engineering services for the Washington Street Corridor Complete Streets project in the amount of $598,500. Approving an amendment number 8 with Hill International for additional construction services for the Brookline High School expansion project in the amount of $100,340. Approving a change order number 4 with CTA for the Brookline High School expansion, Tappan Gym and 3rd floor renovation in the amount of $86,514.60. Approving GMP, that's gross maximum price, change order with Skanska in the amount of $0 for the Brookline High School expansion project. Approving a request to increase the contract with Sumco Eco Contracting for the Lars Anderson Lagoon Structures project in the total amount of $338,863.99. Approving the contract ultra thin bonded wearing course extra work order number 1 with Aggregate Industries in the amount of $115,796.04 for additional work associated with the ultra thin bonded wearing course. Now accepting the Commonwealth Security Trust Fund grant from the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security for the fire department in the amount of $9,390.85 for joint training exercises with the police department and Transformative, aka Fallon Ambulance. Accepting the Commonwealth Security Trust Fund grant from the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security for the police department in the amount of $7,152.14 for joint training exercises with the fire department and Transformative, aka Fallon Ambulance. Approving an entertainment license for DTJ Group doing business as Mandarin Gourmet at 1020 West Roxbury Parkway, television from Sunday to Saturday, 11:30 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. Approving a temporary all kinds beverage license to the Hellenic Association of Boston to be held on Saturday, August 28th for a quinceañera party from 6 p.m. to 1 a.m. at 162 Goddard Ave. Approving a temporary all alcohol beverage non-sales license to the Lars Anderson Auto Museum to be held on Saturday, August 28th for a wedding reception from 4:30 p.m. to 11 p.m. at 15 Newton Street. Approving a temporary all alcohol beverages non-sales license to the Lars Anderson Auto Museum to be held on Saturday, August 14th for a wedding reception from 5 p.m. to 11 p.m. at 15 Newton Street. Approving a temporary wine and malt beverages non-sales license to Lars Anderson Auto Museum to be held on Saturday, July 31st for a wedding reception from 5:30 p.m. to 10 p.m. at 15 Newton Street. Awarding and executing contract to Indus, formerly Seal Coating Inc., for the annual fiber reinforced crack sealing, fog sealing, and rejuvenator work in the amount of $172,007.38. That is the miscellaneous items. All those in favor, Bernard,
Aye.
Raul,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Miriam,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Our regular calendar. We have a fire department promotion. Do we have the chief available?
Deputy Chief Keith Flaherty is here to make the recommendation presentation this evening.
Great.
So Keith, you're ready to go, so you can unmute, please.
Good evening to the board. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hey, I'm pleased to be present in some sort of fashion here to recommend the promotion of one of our firefighters by name Devin Ream to the rank of lieutenant.
Excellent. How long has he been with the department?
Firefighter Ream joined the department in August of 2013. He was third in his academy class. He has completed his emergency medical technician rating. He is a firefighter 1-2 and has achieved the hazardous materials operations level certifications. He's a very motivated and competent firefighter, and we are happy to welcome him into officer rank.
Excellent. Any questions, Raul?
Sure. I'm wondering if you can tell us about the position which you would be promoted to.
Yes, he initially is going into the training division. We have 3 officers in that division, and he will be learning the trade from the deputy chief and the captain that are already present, and then giving classes to our suppression forces. After that point in time, once he's built up some seniority, he will probably request transfer out to an engine or a ladder company when that availability comes.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions by board members? Otherwise, oh, John. Don't forget to unmute.
Yeah, I'm just slow on the draw there. Congratulations to the department on this promotion, and to Devin Ream, of course. Does this create a vacancy that we'll be hearing more about in terms of a future promotion?
Not for a promotion. It creates a vacancy in the firefighter ranks. Devin's promotion is actually to fill a vacancy from a recently retired Lieutenant Roy Crosley.
Thank you.
Excellent. So if there are no other questions, I can move that we promote firefighter Devin Ream to the position of lieutenant. All those in favor? Bernard?
Aye.
Raul?
Hi.
John?
Aye.
Miriam?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. I see Devin in attendance. I didn't know if he might want to say a few words now that he is officially promoted. And congratulations.
I just want to say thank you. That's all I got.
I like it. Straight and to the point.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And we appreciate your work and in working hard to make our fire department more capable of handling types of situations that could be developing in town. So, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And thank you, Keith Flaherty, for the presentation.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Have a good night.
You too. So moving on, I believe it's the BAA. Do we have somebody from BAA to make a presentation?
Chair Hamilton, Stuart Wall is on.
Excellent. So Stuart, if you could try to make it as brief as possible, and then I'll open it up to select board members if they have any questions.
Sure. Good evening, members of the board. Stuart Wall on behalf of the BAA. The Boston Athletic Association requests that the town of Brookline issue a special use permit to conduct the 125th Boston Marathon on Monday, October 11th, 2021. The race operations team is reviewing site plans, event timelines, equipment needs, and other items, and coordinating with the town and others as required. We'll provide updates to all partners as soon as they are available. Earlier this month, we met with police, fire, and public works and covered a number of items, including the new outdoor dining areas. We do plan to maintain the same pedestrian crossings of Beacon Street as we have in past years, located at Tappan, the Washington Square area, Webster, the Coolidge Corner area, and Hawes Streets in the Longwood area. The BAA requests that Brookline's authorization include permission to control and utilize the roadway and adjacent sidewalks and other appropriate areas as determined in our planning sessions to conduct the race in a safe and controlled manner. This includes permission to deliver and install course signage, hydration stations, portable toilets, medical stations, timing mats, mile markers, sponsor activations, and other equipment. And we look forward to working with the town to conduct a safe and successful event for all the athletes, volunteers, and spectators taking part in the 125th Boston Marathon.
Great. Thank you very much for that short introduction. Miriam and then Raul.
So just a question, because typically, obviously pre-COVID, the BAA half marathon was held in October and the full marathon in April. So what's going to happen to the half this year?
Absolutely. So I think we're in a very different schedule in place this year. So right now the BA is only planning on the Boston Marathon as our 2021 event. So all of our other events have been moved to virtual only. Our half's actually taking place in September, but there won't be any on the road component. And as we look ahead to 2022, our hope and expectation is that our schedule goes back to normal. And we see a full marathon in April, and then the half comes back in October. So more to come in that area as we see what happens, but that's our hope.
Excellent. Raul?
Thanks, Heather. So Stuart, I've been a big fan of Boston Marathon in particular, not necessarily just because of the elite runners, but because of the everyday people running by, and I've been out there cheering them on and all those kinds of things in the past. Like many people, and I hope you've been sort of prepared to talk about this, the scheduling on Indigenous Peoples Day. I am the Select Board's liaison to the Indigenous Peoples Day Committee, and this has been, particularly a bone of contention for Indigenous people throughout the region, but particularly in communities like ours and Newton and others that are along the marathon route, and the disruption of the rescheduling of the marathon to this day, and in particular, without the consultation of Indigenous people. And I'm hoping that you have something to say about what the marathon is doing to address that conflict and to work to make it right with Indigenous communities.
Absolutely, that's a great question, and I think the rescheduling and the finding of a new date was not something that we took lightly or tried to approach in any sort of short-sighted manner. I think we did try to take our time and really communicate with all of our city and town partners. I know that there are parts of the BA that are looking at how we recognize it and how we celebrate Indigenous people and Indigenous people's participation in the marathon, both in our history and in present day at the event. So in various aspects of race weekend, I expect it will be showing up and appearing. I know that members of our staff have met with various groups that have brought forward certain concerns, and I think we're still working through how we're addressing those specific concerns and what those specific needs are. I think if there's a particular group or if there's a particular question or need within the town of Brookline, I can absolutely bring that to the appropriate people at the BAA. So if there's any incompleteness in that answer, I can certainly redirect it and find you the right person to give you a little bit more complete explanation to it. But I've heard loud and clear. We are absolutely aware of it. I think we're doing our best to make it sort of an imperfect day work and to recognize that important day as well as part of the Boston Marathon also taking place that day.
Yeah, if I can follow up, I just, this is, having Indigenous Peoples Day in Brookline didn't come easy. There was a warrant article process through town meeting. It was a very difficult process, particularly for the Indigenous people that were helping to lead that effort in our community. And it's something that I think we take great pride in. We've been sort of celebrating now for a couple of years. Obviously, last year with the pandemic, we weren't really able to do that. So I think folks are very excited this year to pull a celebration together and are thinking about some banners along the marathon route and everything. I just got to tell you, like I was on the BAA site earlier trying to find some statement, something that even acknowledges the controversy, or and it is for Indigenous people in our community and everywhere, that are continuously left out of conversations around everything from policing to environmental justice issues to other issues, when they are in many of those cases the group that is most disproportionately impacted by those issues, right? And this sort of sense of erasure, I can't help but feel that same sense of erasure is happening right now with Indigenous communities vis-a-vis the Boston Marathon selection of Indigenous Peoples Day for that site. And maybe there's some behind the scenes conversations going on, but I really would like to see a more public facing acknowledgement by the BAA at a minimum, but then also what does reparations look like for this too? What kind of contributions is the BAA planning to make beyond some banners or some mentions during the race on TV or something? What is the BAA going to actually do to improve the condition of Indigenous people today and to highlight those communities? I think that's what I'd like to hear before approving a permit, not afterwards, right? And so we don't have a whole lot of outside of this moment right now. I don't know that we're necessarily going to see you again, except for maybe something smaller down the line. And so for me, I wouldn't feel comfortable voting to approve this until I know what the BAA is going to do, to make it right for those communities.
Yeah, I guess from my perspective, heard loud and clear. I'm happy to take that. I certainly appreciate those comments. Take those to our communications team and our leadership, and we can find the right way to get you that information so that you do feel comfortable. I don't know if we want to follow up with any sort of meeting, but I'm happy to make sure that happens. As you said, I do know that there are things happening sort of behind the scenes, but perhaps they haven't been made public enough yet. So I can take that back to our team here, and we can make sure we address those questions.
Great, thank you.
What's the latest you need the permit?
From our perspective, I think that's more in your court than in our court. We're going to continue on with our planning as we have been for the past several months. So if this needs to be tabled and brought up at a future select board meeting, I don't think that would negatively impact our planning here.
Okay. Any other board members? Bernard.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable tabling this, for these reasons. I'll go by whatever the board says, but.
Miriam.
Well, I am comfortable tabling it for these reasons, because I think otherwise it becomes rhetoric, and I don't think any of us are really interested in that.
I also don't hear an objection by the BAA right now. John, do you have any thoughts on the matter?
Well, I think given that the BAA does not have objection to our taking a little bit more time with this, I think we should take some more time with this. I actually was going to ask the same question that my colleague Raul Fernandez asked, and I think it is something that deserves discussion. I just want to make it clear, though, that the tradition of the BAA marathon is one of, let's just face it, it's one of the things that makes people feel really good about Boston. It's one of the things most appreciated about Boston. It's a glorious tradition. It's had its ups and downs, famous stories, infamous stories, about the first time that a woman competed and so on. But it's part of who we are. And we can work this out, and we will work this out. But there is no doubt in my mind that Brookline is not going to stand in the way of there being a marathon, and we're going to work it out. And so I don't want people to get the wrong message from this. I don't want to see a headline that says Brookline threatens to block the marathon, blah, blah, blah. I think we want to take some more time with it. And I trust that the BAA will come back to the board with, some answers to the questions that were asked by my colleague.
Bernard.
Yeah, if we're not going to get that type of headline, it will be because we have clear guidance to the BAA as to what it is we expect them to do. I mean, Raul mentioned everything from public acknowledgements to reparations. I think that if this is going to have any meaning, it should be clear, that we have some reasonable expectations, and that there's some deadline as to when we get them, so that we can approve this this license at a time that's not going to run into the preparations for the marathon.
Well, I know we are
And
meeting.
we have one meeting left in this, and then we're into warrant article fun and games.
Well, that's not entirely true. We've got next week and then we've got the
That's right.
31st, I believe. I think this makes sense for us to revisit on August 31st. If Stuart, you can come back to us with something that resembles what Raul described. It doesn't have to be everything, but the start of a productive conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. And my apologies. I'm not more prepared to talk about that particular aspect of the event. I think normally spend more time talking about some of the operational details. So I will get some more information on that important part of the October date. And I guess my question to the board would be, is there any desire to have any email communication or set up a meeting prior to the 31st, or just if I or another individual from the BA comes prepared on the 31st to present what our current thoughts and what our thoughts, with the feedback from this meeting are, is that sufficient, or do we want to continue the conversation in another forum prior to that date?
Before we answer that question, I know Raul had his hand up and Bernard had his hand up, and then
No, I didn't.
I have some thoughts. Oh, okay. So Raul first, and then I have my own thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's actually exactly what I was going to offer, is to connect. If it's not with you, Stuart, then someone else at the BAA to talk about what the plans are there, to address this issue. I'm happy to also bring in Raquel Halsey, who is the chair of the Indigenous Peoples Day committee, as well as part of that conversation. And so when you show up on August 31st, there shouldn't be any surprises of exactly where we are. You'll go into that meeting at least knowing, where I stand on it, and perhaps some of the folks from the Indigenous community in and around Brookline.
And I do believe that so my thoughts were, yes, I would encourage you to work with at least one of us offline. We get into some open meeting law violation territory if it's more than one or two of us. So feel free to reach out to Raul or Bernard. And then you will have to come back because you need the vote of the full board for this. So we'll have each one of us, the select board members, will have an opportunity to ask questions again, just like this, and weigh in on our expectations and our thoughts on the new proposal.
All right, that sounds good. Yeah, I can, Raul, I'll plan to connect with you and connect you with some individuals on our staff that'll have a little bit more information to continue that conversation in that forum. And then I would just encourage anyone else, if there is a particular question that you'd like me to address the next session, let me know. We can certainly ensure that happens.
Great. Bernard.
Yeah, maybe he should share that with the entire board through Devin. It will become a publicly posted item.
Okay.
Okay.
Stuart, do you have Devin's contact information? She's not able to be with us tonight.
I do, yes.
Oh, good. Okay.
Great.
Excellent. Well, thank you, and we'll see you on the 31st, if not before.
All right. Thank you, members.
Great. Thank you. Next, I believe we have where did it go? A common victular license, change in hours, change in manager, change in alternate manager. Ooh, a trifecta. So who is speaking on behalf of Kurtz & Co.?
I'm happy to do that tonight. And we have Cam here as well. So we have been running Kurtz & Co. almost 4 years. It'll be 4 years in August. And thanks to some grant help and just some good luck. We're coming out of COVID strong, and teams are changing and growing. And so really what we just need to do is change the manager. We have a general manager who has been working at our store and kept it up and running. And that's Jillian. She's not here today because this is the first vacation day she's had in a year and a half. I mean, she's taken days off. This is the first time she's ever done anything. And I didn't have the heart to tell her to sign into this meeting. I'm very sorry. But Jillian has been absolutely fantastic. Before COVID, she was running our store at the Boston Public Market. She came in, stepped up, and kept our entire staff healthy, and runs classes and helps, and is absolutely fantastic, and is the reason why we're thriving. And we also brought Cam on board, who's on this call, and we wanted to make a backup manager too. And Cam has come on to help us with events. We've been working with Urban Grape a lot, and doing a lot of corporate stuff, and just trying to help people manage safely fun activities. And it's just time for us to do that. And the other thing that we're asking for, and this was just like a early entrepreneur mistake, we asked to be open one Sunday a month, because we were just going to do it when Cuddy's was doing their Super Cluckin' Sunday, and that was silly. I should have asked for all the Sundays, and so now I'm just asking for all the Sundays, because we're starting to get enough business that with people knocking on our door on Sunday and we're not there. So it's kind of simple. We want to put the right people in the right spots, and be able to sell more cheese on Sundays.
Great. I was a newly elected select board member, and I think this was one of the first hearings that I participated in. So I
We're
love
growing
hearing.
up along together.
Yeah. So are there any questions? Miriam?
I just have to say that I used your catering, your cheese and charcuterie boards for my party after we won. So we love buying cheese, and I would love to buy more cheese on Sunday.
Excellent.
Any other questions, Raul?
Actually, same situation over here. So that's great news. I'll just say also, for those that don't know, Jen Mason, in addition to sort of being a proprietor, has also been very involved in the business community in Brookline, including on the Small Business Development Committee, and just a great participant in everything that we're trying to do to move Brookline forward. So just want to thank you for that, and very excited to support you in your endeavors.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Otherwise, I'll get straight to the vote. I think it's 3 separate votes. So I will move the language now. I move approving the application of a change of manager from Jennifer Mason to Jillian Dana for Kurds & Co. LLC, doing business as Kurds & Co. at 288 Washington Street. Bernard?
Aye.
Raul?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Miriam?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. I move approval the application for a change in common victular hours for Kurds & Co. LLC, doing business as Kurds & Co. at 288 Washington Street, from Tuesday to Saturday, 11 a.m. to 6:30 p.m., one Sunday a month, 11 a.m. to 6:30 p.m., to Tuesday through Sunday, 11 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. Bernard?
Aye.
Raul?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Miriam?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. And then the last vote, I move approval of the application for alternate manager Camille Burjone for Kurds & Co. LLC, doing business as Kurds & Co. at 288 Washington Street. Bernard?
Aye.
Raul?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Miriam?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Okay, you're official.
Thanks so much. I'll tell Jillian when she gets back from work. She's got another day she's got to work. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, moving along. Now we're into board commission interviews. First up are the transportation board applicants. I believe Wendy Friedman might be first. Yes. So Wendy, you will have a couple of minutes. Actually, if you could try to make it as close to 90 seconds as possible to do like a little bit about you, why you're interested, we'll open it up to questions by board members, if that's okay.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm Wendy Friedman. I am a member of Precinct 5. I live on Walnut Street, just south of Route 9 or Boylston Street. I'm also a first-time town meeting member. I was just made a town meeting member by a quorum of right before town meeting began. So I did not run this year, but I filled a vacancy that came up in Precinct 5. So that's just a little background about me. I am not a transportation professional, but I am very interested in transportation and particularly in sort of street design in Brookline. So in addition to being a town meeting member now, I serve on the Boylston Street study group, study committee with John Van Scoyoc leading that from the select board. And I also serve on the Safe Routes to School committee. So, you know, all of these things, the Safe Routes to School, as well as the Boylston Street Study Group, you know, really sort of around kind of building a community space that we can all participate in and be proud of in Brookline. And that's my interest in the Transportation Board as well. So I'm I feel very passionately about having, you know, sort of street level design and us implementing our Complete Streets agenda in Brookline. And I would really like to have the opportunity to be a part of that. I feel it's really important for us, you know, that it's part of transportation planning to make sure that we have a holistic Complete Streets approach to our transportation, to our street design, and that we are really meeting the needs and keeping of our citizens and keeping Brookline, you know, at a very accessible community level that allows people to interact with their neighbors, get to know each other, see each other on the street, go visit our stores and businesses, and I just see transportation as being integral to all of that. So,
great, thank you. Any questions by board members for Wendy? John?
Yeah, Wendy, it's good to see you. We were at a meeting earlier today. I just think it would help spread the word a little bit about the Boylston Street Corridor Study Committee. If you wanted to just highlight some of the transportation issues we're looking at on that particular committee. And I will say on Wendy's behalf, she asked great questions, and I always appreciate people who ask great questions. So.
Thank you. Sure. So I think one of the ways that the committee is looking at transportation, one of the things that we did that you all probably know about is that we did a survey of residents and business owners in the area to really understand what the perspectives are of the corridor, what the needs are, what the challenges and pain points, as we know that Boylston is a pain point for a lot of people, particularly people that live around that corridor. And so, a big finding from that survey, not surprisingly, I think to most of us, is that traffic and noise is one of the biggest challenges of that corridor. So people that live in the area really wanting to see traffic slow down coming through there, less noisy, less highway-like, and that it's also a real barrier to commercial activity. That we know that there's not a lot of foot traffic on Boylston because it's not a nice place to walk. There's also not a lot of amenities on Boylston in terms of being comfortable to walk there. So sidewalks are very narrow, almost non-existent in some places. They often have cars parked on them because parking is also very narrow there. So we're really looking at making recommendations around how to rethink about Boylston, how it might be designed differently in terms of the width of lanes, Whether it's feasible to remove lanes, whether it's feasible to remove parking, even if you don't change, how much is, the number of lanes for cars, where there are opportunities to widen sidewalks, are there opportunities to bridge the divide between north and south there by adding more pedestrian crossing. So we're really thinking, a lot about just how to not only address the needs of the cars and the drivers there, but also to see if there's a way, understanding that this is a state highway, is there an opportunity anyway to connect the two sides of Boylston a little bit better and have people be able to more easily flow across Boylston rather than it feel like a divide. I think a lot of people in North Brookline feel like Brookline sort of stops at Boylston Street. I actually was a teenager in Brookline, and I went to Brookline High School, and I think I almost never crossed Boylston Street. I lived in Washington Square, and the high school was as far south as I went, basically. And I think that there is a real psychological barrier with that street. So, we're, that's part of the thinking about on this committee.
Thank you, Wendy, for that answer.
Excellent. Any other, Miriam?
I just want to say, Wendy, you did an excellent, thorough job filling out the application online and talking about your experience in Brooklyn, New York. And I just want to commend you because I think some people don't really take the time to do that. And it was very, very helpful for me to understanding your background.
Oh, thank you.
Any other members? Raul, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, I also caught that, and I see you working with Brad Lander out there, which I think speaks well for you. He's terrific. Let me ask you about, you talked about sort of navigating Brookline with a stroller, which is something I've been doing recently. Obviously, a lot to say about the sidewalks in Brookline and the need to make those more accessible. I've been meaning to send a note to some folks in town about accessibility, because if I've got a tough time with the stroller, I can only imagine somebody in a wheelchair getting down some of these sidewalks. What about things like accessibility, whether it be for people with mobility issues or with strollers, as it relates to sort of what you might deal with on the transportation board, which is the streets in Brookline? Is there anything we should be maybe doing differently there?
Well, I mean, I think that we really need to be, we have this complete streets policy, and I think that we really need to always take that into account whenever we're redoing streets. So whether that means that there's an opportunity to widen sidewalks. I mean, I completely agree. I was, I'm no longer, thankfully, in the stroller days, but I have navigated the streets with a stroller. I can't imagine navigating with a double stroller. There are lots of people with twins, and so I guess what I would say is that I would certainly bring that perspective. Like I am a driver, I'm a parent, I bike, I walk, I've used the streets in sort of every user mode. And so I definitely feel that I would, and that's part of why I'm interested in the board, is that I feel like it's important in all sort of transportation decisions to bring all of those perspectives and uses into account. So I don't, I can't say specifically what that means in terms of, the details of the decisions that are made, since I would be new to the board, but for me, any opportunity when streets are being redone to widen sidewalks, if there's a need to widen sidewalks, if that means that there's, also an opportunity to narrow lanes, because, sometimes just historically our lanes can be, sometimes they're very narrow, but sometimes they can be quite wide, and there is opportunity to narrow and grab some of that real estate for sidewalks. I think that should always be considered.
Thank you.
Excellent. We do have about 4 other interviews for transportation board. So any other questions? No, seeing none. Thank you very much, Wendy.
Thank you so much.
So the next one on our list, Jesse.
Good
Great.
evening. Hi. Yep. Here I am.
So if you could try to keep your bio and
interest.
interest to under 2 minutes.
Sure. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Jesse Hefter, currently resident at Chestnut Hill Avenue in Precinct 14. We've been in this neighborhood over 30 years. 5 years before that, we were actually, when we first came back to Boston, 5 years on Winchester Street. So we've been in Brookline for 36 and a half years or so. My wife was born and bred on Sumner Road, so she's here from the beginning. My interest in serving the town on the T-board stems from a deep commitment to helping us make travel by either car, bike, foot, all three I do all the time, my family's as well, my kids who live here as well, more pleasant and efficient. To the point Raul just mentioned, I'm at both ends of the spectrum. I've got grandchildren living across the street and we're doing biking and all kinds of things. And I've also got a mother in her 90s who I take care of who lives on William Street and she's on a walker. So the kinds of issues about moving around on sidewalks where tree roots lift up sidewalk edges and where trunks of trees are in the way and where there are pieces of concrete missing are also things that I pick up on all the time. I've watched the traffic steadily increase in the town over the last 36 years. I've seen the bike lanes appear and the competing needs for street space grow. I spent over 35 years working for Verizon in a variety of positions, retiring 2 years ago. Everything from material science to data science to software science to field instruction to design architecture and many other careers at Verizon over those 36 years, becoming one of the 2 or 3 highest ranking IT professionals in the IT section of over 10,000 people before I retired. In that career, I faced often some very elaborate and difficult situations to solve at the corporate level from a technology standpoint, and was always very careful to ensure that all voices on teams were heard, all perspectives were considered. Within Brookline, over 30 years ago, I volunteered to solve a problem that had been facing the Orthodox Jewish community here for forever, which was building what's called an Eruv. It's sort of a construct that joins homes and neighborhoods together into a shared space on the Sabbath to allow young families to move strollers about on the Sabbath and be together as a family outside, and those with physical challenges to use a wheelchair, walker, or cane to be able to move around on the Sabbath, get to synagogue, get to families and homes, etc. As volunteer leader of that organization to this day, over the last 30 years, I found a way to meet and work with leaders from Brookline, Boston, Newton, the state, acquiring all required licenses and permits. I completed that project in '93, and I continue to maintain cooperative working relationships with town leadership in Brookline, as well as Newton and Boston, the DPW, the open space group with Erin, before she was elevated to run DPW, engineering departments in all the towns, and state organizations like the MBTA, the MTA, DCR. I'm very committed to inclusion of all residents in the town spaces and to find ways to continue to improve upon what we already have. That also led me to volunteer 2 years ago for the Committee on Pedestrian-Friendly Street Lighting. The report was just given to the board recently under the passionate stewardship of Frank Caro, who unfortunately passed away almost a year ago now. He was a good friend, and with other group of volunteers, including town staff, we took a very serious and broad look at the needs of the walking public in town after dark, particularly in the main walking corridors, Longwood Avenue, Washington Street, Beacon, Harvard. Our report, updated by Dave Trevitt, has been provided to you, and we look forward to seeing some of those recommendations implemented in many of the current and future projects in the town. My wife at Townie, Brenda, is a special ed professional.
So you're over your 2 minutes, but if you can just wrap it up.
Okay, so I'll just say that through the work with the pedestrian street lighting, we've also been looking very carefully at the Beacon Street Bridle Path Project, the Boylston Complete Streets Project, and also the Washington Street end-to-end overhaul. And I look forward with the Transportation Board and town staff to ensure that all of our neighborhoods can be heard and that we work to bring modern, accessible transportation technology and infrastructure to everyone within the town.
Great. Any questions for Jesse? Miriam.
Thank you, Jesse, for your application. And I've also taken a look at your resume. I appreciate that you have worked on the town of Brookline, the Commission on Pedestrian Friendly Street Lighting, and on the Greater Boston Air Corporation. I'm still feeling like I don't have a great understanding of your overall contribution to transportation. And so I'm just hoping you could deepen my understanding a little bit where your transportation experience, what your thoughts are on complete streets, and how you could bring all of that together.
Right. So thank you for asking that. So part of it is that I'm a pretty technical kind of guy, and my material science background actually from a long time ago had to do with concrete reinforced materials. This is back in the 80s and 90s. And so I understand a lot about streets as they're built. In the Verizon time, we did a lot of work in the underground. So that's manholes, cable vaults, controlled underground facilities and things along those lines. And so I have a sort of a good understanding of streets, street structure, street building. And then as a resident, as a citizen within the town, very cognizant, as I mentioned earlier, about the mobility from my mom or strollers for my grandchildren, there are issues in the town that I've noticed, and that some of which I've sent to Todd Corain, some of which in terms of traffic I've talked to the police department about. In terms of just my noticing and observing transportation issues within the town, and then bring my technical and people background to sort of advance the issues as they're brought forward. I'm not a traffic engineer or something along those lines. Doing it as a responsible citizen.
No, that was very helpful. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? John.
Jesse, thank you so much for applying for the Transportation Board. And it's funny, we do have these 2-minute limitations, but I found myself sort of engrossed in what you were saying, and it didn't even occur to me you'd gone over your limitation. But I respect the chair's decision to make sure we hold it as best we can. Sure. Do you want to just take this opportunity to quickly explain to people about pedestrian-friendly lighting? Because I'm sure that is that's part of what connects to your mother. Did you say mother or grandmother? I'm sorry.
Mother, yeah.
Yeah. But go ahead, because I think a lot of people might not sort of grasp that concept yet.
Right. So one of the things that, just give you a couple of very quick examples. We spent a lot of time looking at the current situation with street lighting in Brookline. So I'll just give you maybe 2 examples. The issues really are that you're playing against a very curious balance between lighting the streets, lighting the sidewalks, and not lighting into people's homes. So we have corridors within Brookline that we try to make street night friendly, light friendly. We have corridors like Longwood Avenue, where there are a tremendous amount of people walking back and forth from the medical center. Even during pandemic, it'll come back to its normal thousands of people a day walking up and down that street, and the lighting's very poor. Part of the lighting issues is that the standards that the town has used over the years in refurbishing different areas has been different. Some of it is halogen lights. Now they're being replaced with LED lights. Sometimes they're standards that are up in the trees. Sometimes they're too far spaced because the town has used the existing utility poles, which are not spaced the same as what you need to provide the right light to the street. We identified issues with the types of lighting fixtures that the town has chosen. We recommended that the town utilize specific lighting design architect companies that are used by Cambridge and others, other cities and towns, in order to make the right decision about the color of the light, the luminosity, the brightness, the directionality, so that we don't send it into people's first floor windows and instead send it down on the street. We looked at cost with the DPW at what it costs to put electrical lines under the sidewalks. Maybe we make it part of complete streets so that when we're digging up to make a bridle path or wider sidewalks, we electrify the parking meters, that we do it right so that we have the ability to put in the right kind of fixtures. We took a look at areas that seem to be pretty well done, like Commonwealth Avenue, the Brookline and Boston side out near the Star Market out there. However, if you notice there's no tree cover. And so one of the most lovely things about Brookline is that we have over 200,000 trees more in North Brookline than South. And, you know, the corridor area in Boylston is one that was, Tool Design has come back and said, we need more trees there. The challenge we try to balance there is that as the trees grow, it can involve the lights. And so the lighting has to be kept in mind or considered at the time when we're doing the actual design. And we need a sort of a standardized protocol for how to do that as we move through. So the report that Dave Trevette helped us finish was a summary of the key areas, the Washington Street corridor, Beacon Street, Harvard Street, and Longwood Avenue, and made a whole set of key recommendations that will make the evening walking in Brookline both conducive and attractive now that people are, you know, sitting outside and eating, and we want the commercial areas to be populated with people who can see where they're going and where the lighting enhances and makes it more aesthetic, and then try to do it in a way also that balances lighting for the streets, that is for bicyclists, because lighting for sidewalks can help bicyclists if they're sharing the paths, correct? So, and then something like Route 9, where the state puts this lighting standards in the median, is good for the street, is good for the cars, but not at all for the pedestrians. And so many of us who walk up and down Boylston Street, starting in Chestnut Hill down to Brookline Village, will quickly notice in the evenings that most of the time you spend walking in the dark. And so you sort of meet.
We need to move on.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
You'll see a lot more in the report.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your interest. We
welcome.
need
Thanks,
to go to our
John, for the
next
question.
candidate.
Thank you. Good night.
So is it Emily that's next up?
We have Emily up.
Great. So Emily, if you could try to keep it under 2 minutes, your bio and why you're interested, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Sure. Hi, nice to see you all again, and nice to meet you, Miriam. My name is Emily Jacobson. I live just outside Brookline Village on Walnut Street in Precinct 5. I hold a bachelor's and a master's degree in civil engineering. So although my current area of practice is structural engineering, I do understand the basics, the fundamentals of transportation engineering. I've been a resident of Brookline just over 2 years, so I've had a lot of catching up to do. I joined the Bicycle Advisory Committee last year, and with the Bicycle Advisory Committee, in conjunction with the Pedestrian Advisory Committee, I spearheaded the writing of a memo on recommendations of policy changes for pedestrian and cyclist accommodation around construction sites. I've also been in attendance at the majority of the T-Board meetings over the past year. I'm applying to serve on the Transportation Board because I'm interested in transportation policy beyond the more narrow scope of the Bicycle Advisory Committee. I'd like to see the excellent work of the Transportation Division carried forward. I'd like to see more complete streets projects come before the Transportation Board. I want to see the most vulnerable road users put at the forefront of our policymaking decisions. And I'd just like to say that across America, violent accidents involving pedestrians and vehicles are on the rise. And unfortunately, Brookline is not immune to this trend. If you look back over the last several years of police reports for Brookline, you'll see that violent accidents with vehicles are outpacing the assaults in town. So this is a really worrying trend. And I've heard again and again at Transportation Board meetings and also on my neighborhood listserv, people say, oh, this or that corner is really dangerous. It's just an accident waiting to happen. And that's really unfortunate. A lot of accidents are inevitable, but a lot of them are also predictable. And good design can make sure that these predictable accidents don't become a reality. So that is my motivation. I hope you have some questions for me.
I'm sure we do. Miriam.
I always have a question. Emily, tell me your thoughts on complete streets.
I think this is a great program and a great way for the state to incentivize towns to adopt modern transportation policy. I've looked at the Complete Streets Prioritization Plan, and I'm excited to see Washington Street, Brookline Avenue coming up, Longwood Avenue coming up. Although the Bridle Path is not a complete streets plan, and neither is the Boylston Corridor a complete streets plan. We've seen really interesting designs come forward for both of those corridors that really manage to balance all the different modes of transport. The Boylston, the Beacon Street one was particularly interesting because the designer showed a plan that would result in, one of the plans would result in an only 1% parking loss across the whole corridor while making space for a multi-use path in the center of the street. So I thought that was a really innovative way to balance the needs of everyone.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions, John?
Emily, welcome. And I want to say it's good to see you again, because you have shown an interest in transportation, which has been steady over time. And I really appreciate that. And I appreciate the fact that you attend these transportation board meetings and take an active role through the bicycling advisory committee in the transportation planning in the town. This may be a little bit of a stretch, but I'm going to dare to ask you, since you have been an observer of the transportation board, would you identify some of the things that you believe, or that you have concluded might be done differently by the transportation board, especially when it comes to setting transportation policy for the town?
I think the Transportation Board and the Transportation Division already have really excellent policy. I think that a lot of the time it would be nice to see the committees that are serving the Transportation Board, the the Pedestrian Advisory Committee, the Bicycle Advisory Committee, and the Shared Mobility Advisory Committee, given, I guess, a little bit more weight when they put forward policy, when they give their opinion on certain street designs, given that they are often representing a larger number of people, and because they have considered over a long period of time the town policies. So I think it's very, very important to engage individual people in the conversation, but I think also those committees' work should not be lost. I don't know if that's clear.
No, it's very clear, and thank you for that answer. Yeah, yes, thank you.
Any other questions for Emily? I understand that you're originally from Canada. What are some of the biggest surprises that you've found regarding transportation in the US?
It's very, very similar, I think, is not very surprising. I guess one of the biggest surprises would be probably the speed limits in school zones. They're very high here, and you can see maximum speed limits in school zones having a real impact on the safety of children, the safety of all those people crossing the street. I think part of it is just the conversion between miles and kilometers. When you say 20 miles an hour, that doesn't sound so fast, but a lot of places in Canada, it's 20 kilometers an hour in the school zone, and that is significantly slower.
Thank you for that. Any other questions before we move on to our next candidate? Seeing none, thank you very much, Emily. We'll be in touch. And I believe there is one or two others, Paul, Hannah. I know we were also trying to hear from Harry Margolis, so I will leave it to Kate to let me know if he joins. But Paul, if you could try to keep it under 2 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Thank you, Heather, and I will do my best. I have the advantage of being the last speaker, and I don't envy your position. The three candidates I've heard already, it seems you have lots of fantastic choices, so I hope I'm also considered one of them as well. I live across from Town Hall in Brookline Village. I'm an avid walker. I walk all around town along the main corridors that we've discussed, Boylston, Washington Street, Longwood, etc. And I am a bit of a hobbyist urban planner. So I try to notice the things that make walking easier. Not only for me, I consider myself a relatively able walker. So I'm like the lowest common denominator or the easiest common denominator, so to speak. But I also have small children. I've done the stroller thing. My children are actually twins. So I've found spots on the streets where a double stroller won't fit, particularly on Longwood Avenue going out towards the bridge towards Boston. You have to actually go on the street. I noticed the effects of storefront design in terms of desirability of walking. So that's sort of what I bring, a bit of the hobbyist, a bit of the lived experience in terms of transportation and walking in particular. I do own a car as well, fairly recently, I should say. And I experience the streets from the car perspective, which makes me even more fearful of walking sometimes because I see how cars drive from my own perspective. So that's something that I think that's really important. I want our streets to be accessible for everyone. Again, I consider myself sort of the able-bodied, the lowest common denominator, but we need our streets to be accessible for children, for the elderly, for people of all abilities and ages to be able to access the streets and really enjoy our really lovely town of Brookline on foot and in any other way that they want to enjoy it. So that's sort of the motivations for why I want to join the Transportation Board. What I might be able to bring to the Transportation Board, I don't have I've been living in Brookline now for about 2 years, and this would be my first foray into local government. And so that for one is a bit exciting to me. And what I can bring to the Transportation Board from sort of a professional perspective, my background is in budgeting and in data. I work in government, so I understand the trade-offs that are required when you work in government. You can't get everything you want. You can have the best ideas and the best designs and the best policies, but if you don't have the money to do it, or if there are other priorities, it won't happen. So that's something that maybe I might bring a little bit unique, is this understanding that there are trade-offs in government, necessarily so, because money is not unlimited. And the other thing I think is a bit unique, I am by profession a negotiator. What that means is it requires me to understand the perspective and the arguments from people who not only agree with me, which makes it easy, but people who disagree with me. So professionally speaking, I have to be able to understand all perspectives that are going to come before the Transportation Board, and their desires, needs, and wants, and what they're trying to achieve when issues before the Transportation Board are presented. So I think that's something that maybe is a bit unique about me. And I think I'll leave it at that and open for questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Paul? John, and then Bernard.
I'm sorry, I'm one of those people who cannot stand to see people not questioned. So I jump in whenever I can. Paul, thank you. And welcome to, now that you have sort of taken the plunge, welcome to the world of Brookline government and all of its particulars and all of its satisfactions. And boy, do I envy your resume. What an interesting career you've had. I don't know if you, the role you've played with the United Nations, I find fascinating, from your resume. So I would ask you simply to bring to this discussion a little bit more in terms of, you talked about user experience, which is great and very valuable. What can you bring in addition to that will, help to address some of the particulars of transportation planning and expertise that the Transportation Board sometimes has to apply to its work?
Yeah, no, that's a fair question. I think I mean, I do think that the lived experience is useful, but you're right. There's something more beyond that because lots of people walk around the streets. I think probably my greatest advantage in terms of I don't have a deep technical background in terms of streets, and my sense is if that's something that the board requires, if it already has it, then I think I should be able to complement that. You know, I don't think it should be a board that's filled only with purely technical people. It needs skills of other varieties, and I think my skills in governance, in looking at budgets of organizations, government organizations, and understanding what the trade-offs are between, you know, proposal A and proposal B from the governance perspective, I think is something that I would bring that's a little bit unique. And my sense is if you have a transportation board that's just full of pure transportation professionals and specialists, you might be losing a little bit of that diversity.
Thank you for the answer.
Bernard, did you still have a question? You'll have to unmute yourself.
I do.
Excellent.
So, okay, you provoked me into asking this question, Mr. Hanna. So you mentioned your negotiating skills honed at the United Nations. Well, you may think the United Nations is difficult negotiating. Wait till you get to Brookline. And tell me whether you have had an opportunity to sort of sit in and see how discussions and quote negotiations occur in Brookline when the issue is hot button issues or you know, hotly contested issues, including on the transportation board. What would be your thoughts on that?
Sure. So I recently listened in on some of the town meeting discussions, and I believe you're all familiar with the hot button issue of the historic preservation district that they wanted to, that was proposed. I think was ultimately rejected. That there was another vote that came up. So you know, that I seemed quite contentious. So a couple of observations, if I may, from my perspective. So one thing, you know, having virtual negotiations is challenging. And I think everyone's experienced that. I've also conducted virtual negotiations. That comes with its challenges. One of the things that I've learned is people want to be heard, and having a town meeting amongst 250 people is incredibly valuable for democratic governance. You also need to have opportunities to have smaller discussions of interested parties. Again, this is just from my perspective. Having people who are the key players and who disagree the most, get them into a room and have them discuss issues is not going to resolve them, but I think it goes a long way in terms of at least airing out and trying to find out what's motivating the position. What they say in negotiation, you don't want to know somebody's position, you want to know what their interest is. And that's something that takes often time. It requires a lot of listening, active listening, not just passively listening and waiting for your turn to speak. And then digging a little deeper to understand people's perspectives. It doesn't resolve issues all the time, but it helps at least understand where people are coming from. So that maybe that's something I can bring.
Yeah, very good answer. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much for your interest. We will be making a decision fairly soon because there are at least, I think, 1 or 2 vacancies on this board, and they need a kind of super majority. So stay tuned.
Great. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Harry Margolis has joined us. Excellent. Bye, Paul. Thank you. Hi, Harry. If you want to just give about 2-minute background, and then we'll open it up to Q&A.
Okay, sure. So I'm a longtime Brookline resident and town meeting member, and have, as I said, served on town meeting. Also have served on the Bicycle Advisory Committee back in its early days and as chair. So I've been involved in town activities and care a lot about the town and also about transportation in particular. I'm a consumer of many kinds of transportation. So I drive, I bike, I walk, I take the T. I once even tried commuting with rollerblades. It didn't work out so well. And I see transportation as issues as vital to the town, vital to the region and the country. It affects everything from how one spends one's day. Commutes can take forever, and it affects where people live, where they can afford to live. And so I think we need a big change in transportation policy in the country that moves away from the car, away from traffic, and away from traffic jams, and moves more towards alternative forms of transportation. So I think the roads need to be made safer for bicycles, and we need to put more effort. Some of this is, of course, outside of Brookline. A lot of this outside of Brookline, but we need to have better, more convenient, more comfortable mass transportation. And in Brookline, I think we can do a lot on our roads to make it safe and convenient to bicycle, so that will promote that, which is good for everyone's health, good for the health of the environment, and also would mean less traffic.
Excellent. Any questions for Harry? Miriam?
I think I know the answer, Harry, but your opinion on safe streets? I mean, on complete streets.
Complete streets.
Sorry. Yes.
I'm for safe streets and complete streets, the streets that are safe for all forms of getting around.
Any other questions? I have a question. So it was very controversial at the time. Last March, I think, April, this select board was thinking about taking on-street parking away and expanding the sidewalk, doubling its width in certain locations. How would you have fallen on that particular issue?
I probably would have fallen for sidewalks and against parking. Most of our streets are devoted to cars, whether it's moving cars or parked cars, and I think we still need to facilitate cars moving around, and we still need to be able to park. But I think the streets need to be shared more with pedestrians and bikers.
Thank you. Bernard?
Yeah, one of the, hello, Harry.
Hi, Bernard.
We go back many, many years. Anyway, one of the issues that we have here in Brookline, as in probably every community, is how do you balance the interests of bikers and not just cars, but also pedestrians? Drivers drive crazy in this community, in this area, but bikers take their lead from drivers, it appears sometimes. And you walk down Longwood Avenue and you see what I'm talking about. What are your thoughts in terms of street design and traffic management that would address that particular issue?
I think we need separated bike lanes, separated from cars and separated from pedestrians, so that everyone's in a different place and safe from each other. I'd imagine that there should be corridors through town where you have separated lanes for bikers, which I think will be also. I mean, the problem for bikers today is where there's lots of traffic, it's often unsafe to bike on the street. So sometimes bikers resort to biking on the sidewalks, which is of course unsafe for pedestrians. And so I think if we can make it safer for bikers, we can also make it safer for pedestrians as a result.
Of course, the problem we have here in Brookline is our streets aren't always wide enough to accommodate all users, but
yeah, I don't think, I mean, we can't have separate bike lanes on every street, but I think it's possible to have corridors so that people can get around town safely by bike, and then share streets when you're outside those corridors.
Thank you. Any other questions? We've got 2 more interviews, not for transportation, but for another board. Thank you very much for your interest. We'll hopefully be making a decision soon.
Okay, thank you all.
Okay.
Bye.
So the next two interviews are for a Parks and Recreation Commission. Is Antonia first up? Yes. Okay, great. Antonia, if you can try to keep it under 2 minutes, and then we'll open it up to Q&A.
Loved hearing everybody about the transportation issues and all the layers. And I feel like I can begin by saying that Parks and Rec has the same kind of issues. There are so many layers that we have to deal with. And just a little bit about my background. I've practiced landscape architecture for 35 years. I've lived in Brookline for 26, and I've served as a commissioner for 12 years. My professional journey has taken me first from the public sector. I worked with Boston Urban Gardeners, BUG, which was creating open spaces and vegetable gardens in disadvantaged communities and several site improvements for public housing. From there, I jumped into the restoration of historic landscapes, in particular Olmsted landscapes. And then I moved on to medical and educational campuses, which I called therapeutic landscapes. After that, I opened my own firm in 2002 and my first project was St. Aidan's, where I worked with many commissions, the Brookline Housing Commission, the Preservation and Conservation Commission, Parks and Open Space, the public and private sector. And I feel like that was all a very good background for then applying to work on the commission. Our parks bring many facets. We have to integrate with the public, tons and tons of demands, lots of opinions, lots of issues. And I know that you've heard from several commissioners already where you've heard that our parks are overwrought with activities and we don't have enough space. So that's one of our biggest struggles, especially for fields. I feel like my role as a landscape architect focuses on balancing the aesthetic with the recreational and the ecological aspect. You saw on my application some of the projects that I've worked on. I don't know if you want me to go into detail about those.
You probably don't have time.
Okay. But I've thoroughly enjoyed it and want to continue if you would have me to help continue with all the exciting work that's going on.
Great. Thank you so much. Any questions by board members? Bernard and then Miriam.
Yeah, thank you for your application. So I'm going to get my. So, one of the issues I think is really important and exciting in the area of Parks and Recreation is not just accessible playgrounds, but inclusive playgrounds. And Brookline Playground is an example of that. I'm wondering what your thoughts are in terms of things we can do to increase the inclusivity of our playgrounds, which includes making them available